recorded. Normally that, oh yeah, okay, cool, good.
Okay. Wonderful. So good morning, Shavasti, from far, far
Good.
away in Kuala Lumpur.
Yeah, London, other end of the planet. Good morning to you. Mhm.
How are you doing today, this morning, after the heat wave in London?
Quite relieved that it's cooler now, so things are back to quote unquote normal. Not that I find particularly that much normal nowadays in the world that we're living in, but that's why I focus on my work. Just continue to heal, continue to heal, continue to heal. Because part of our job as facilitators, as healers, as therapists, is to hold that grounded center, allow the world to be absolutely insane around us, and just hold that grounded center, not to be in denial around what's going on around us, because that's not fruitful either, but not to get caught up in the fear and the drama and the suspicion and the gossip and the afraid about what's going to happen tomorrow. Because, you know, this illusion that we can control something,
Yeah.
it's just an illusion. We never did have control. We never will have control. We only have control over our own response and who we love and how we love them. And so that just remains my focus no matter what's going on. And I always think, well, if there's a war somewhere between me and Malaysia, then the aircraft will find a different way to get there. If
Yeah.
necessary, I have to go through the west coast of the United States to get to Malaysia. So I don't worry about these things.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. When you just started talking, this reminded to me about our conversation over WhatsApp when the war started, and I'm like, oh my goodness, what is gonna happen? And that were exactly your words, that
Mhm.
this has been happening all the time, somewhere in the world. You've seen it so many times, right?
It's never been any different
It's never
in my
been any
lifetime.
different. Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah,
remember when the war in Ukraine started, people started saying, "Well, how are we going to get to Asia? Because we normally fly over Russia." Well,
yeah,
they found a
yeah,
different route. The Earth
yeah.
is round, so there's always a different route.
There is always a
You know,
different truth. I love it. And probably this is even a wonderful metaphor for the work that we are doing in the
absolutely.
constellations.
There's always a different route.
There
There's
is always
always
a
a different
different
route.
route.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah,
Hmm.
wonderful. So thank you so much for meeting me today. Our intention is to talk about you, Shavasti, and to talk
Right.
about the upcoming workshop in Kuala Lumpur for the second time, end
Hmm.
of August. And I really have to say it. You were the first person I really wanted to meet in person just after reading your book. Not just this
Right.
one. This is The Language of the Soul. That's your second book,
Hmm.
from what I understood. The first
Hmm.
one is Healing Individuals, Nations, and Families and Nations. And you wrote more books. But I remember that after reading that book, I contacted you and really wanted to come to your workshop, or even better, bring you to Kuala Lumpur,
Hmm. Hmm.
which we managed to do last year. And it was
Which
really a
was
big success.
wonderful. And it was
Yeah.
very important to me personally because I have a connection with Malaysia.
Hmm.
I lived in Singapore as a child. And of course, our closest neighbor, because Singapore is not the largest country in the world. So
Not really.
it's not the largest country in the world. So we used to pop across the border to Malaysia a lot and sometimes spend a long weekend there. Um, so we'd go to lots of different locations up the coast, etc., and spend nights or
Beautiful
weekends
places.
in Malaysia. So Malaysian culture, Malaysian food, and just Malaysia was present in my life when I was very young, between the ages of 6 and 10. So very fond childhood memories. Yeah. Mm.
I totally get it. I totally get it. I've been here for 23 years and I really love it. I really love it. There's
Mm.
so many beautiful things about Malaysia and the people. Of course,
Mhm.
not talking about the food, that's amazing too, but
Ah,
people are
yeah,
very,
indeed.
very important. Yeah. Okay, Shavasti, so just tell me what drew you into Family Constellation first, and how did it evolve later to Language of the Soul? Because really, you were the first person that I heard speaking about Language of the Soul. This is what drew me personally to this book of yours.
couple of things there. So, what drew me to the work, I was a very reluctant person, extremely reluctant person to get involved in family constellation work. Every time, I'm talking about back in the 1990s, every
Mm-hmm.
time somebody described it to me, I was not interested. Um, I had done some psychodrama in an Osho community, and it was
Mm-hmm.
just really not my thing. All
Mm-hmm.
that screaming and shouting, and every time somebody described family constellation work to me, it just sounded like psychodrama to me. But a friend of mine said, trust me, just come." So I trusted her, and I went, and it blew me away.
Mm-hmm.
My first response was, "Wow, there's something very different happening here.
Mm-hmm.
This is quieter, it is more grounded, it is authentic." It just felt so true. And then the second time I went, which was basically a week or two later, because I was really quite hooked, then I had this other realization: oh, I have found my work. I have found what I want to do.
Wow.
So I went from very reluctant attendee to
Mm-hmm.
this is my life's work. I have found it. I have
Mm-hmm.
found it. And so, what keeps me in the work and what drew me into the work is that family constellation work taught me how to love. Taught me how to
Mm-hmm.
love. It really taught me how to make contact, taught me how to step out of my story and the drama surrounding it to look at the bare knuckles truth. So liberating. So
Mm-hmm.
liberating because when we go into therapy, we often have all of these stories about
Yeah.
the personalities of all the
Yeah.
people in our family and who said what to whom and da 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 da. And then we look at the raw reality. And so for me, the realization that the real underlying issue was not my mother's personality, but was actually the fact that her mother abandoned her when she was
Mm-hmm.
9.
Mm-hmm.
And when I looked at that stripped back of
Yeah.
all of the stories, then I realized the real deep impact of that. So that abandonment was also playing out in my relationship with my mother.
Yeah.
Mhm. I felt somewhat untouched by her, somewhat abandoned by her. And yet she was extremely present and an
Yeah.
extremely verbal person. So there was no sense of abandonment there from the story
Yeah.
between me and my mother. But
Mm-hmm.
Constellations revealed the underlying truth that there was this thread
Mm-hmm.
of abandonment. And then my mother's mother, her father died in an accident when she was
Oh.
4 years old.
Oh. Yeah.
So that's another thread of abandonment. Obviously,
Yeah.
he didn't consciously abandon her, but that's what the child experiences.
That's what the
I,
child
wo-
feels.
I
Absolutely.
woke up
Mm-hmm.
one day and my papa was no longer there,
Yeah. Yeah.
and she was 4. And then she
Mm-hmm.
ended up abandoning my mother.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm. And so this feeling of the parent is not even there continued for another generation.
Mm-hmm.
And so I could clearly, because I had spent time in psychotherapy talking to a psychotherapist, um, and then suddenly I realized, oh, I've been telling my story, not the truth of the family.
Mm-hmm.
Not the truth of the family. I've been telling my story, my interpretation, my
Mm-hmm.
figuring out of what I think is going on. And then when being presented with the facts, I realize, oh, I didn't even notice that tsunami there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I was concerned with what was going on in this little whirlpool on the
Mm-hmm.
beach, having
Yeah.
no idea that there was a
Yeah.
huge tsunami behind me.
Mm-hmm.
Of events going back and back. And of course, there were other events as well. So that grabbed me, and that was back in 1998. Um, I started facilitating, I would say officially in 2001, although in 2000 I did do a couple of small workshops. I kind of cringe with embarrassment now when I think back at them because,
The beginnings, right? Yeah, I think
oh,
that
yes,
goes for
exactly. Because,
everyone, probably. Yeah,
yeah, because my view nowadays is when you start after doing your training, you know nothing. And
yeah, absolutely.
after 5 years, you still know nothing. And
Yeah,
after 10
yeah,
years, there are still things you don't know, and then you're still learning and expanding all
yeah,
the time.
yeah.
So, what I like to bring to this work is simplicity,
Hmm.
real simplicity, because that is where the healing is. And so, language plays a really important role in that. So, I'll give you an example. Mhm. So, a client had a very kind of big story about their father. Mhm. And there was a lot of anger there, a lot of rage there. And it seemed to be a generational pattern as well. And so, with language, I could help the client to step out of the maelstrom, and it is a maelstrom of their story, to let's be with an absolute authentic truth and see what happens. And so I had the client say to their father, Father, I long for you. Then there was
Yeah,
silence.
yeah,
Then the story fell apart.
yeah.
And so instead of a person in their 50s feeling angry, resentful, bitter, there was suddenly a 10-year-old with their hand being held out towards their father. And so years of attempting to heal something shifted in a moment with a simple sentence, with a simple movement. And so sometimes clients can, and we can all get caught up in this. And they say, "Oh, I just need to explain one more thing." No. You need to understand.
Yeah.
No. You need to understand. I need to explain one more thing. Mhm. And and I just say to them, "No, let's just be quiet for a moment." And I'll say to them something like, "So, from what you've told me, your your grandmother died in childbirth. So what happens if you just look at her in this moment?" And then something appears and they start to feel something. I said, "So there is a familial grief there, but there's also your mother's grief at having lost her mother.
Yeah.
So this grief, this unspoken grief, this unfelt grief, is the machine that's generating the story between you and your mother. And the question is, how much of it is really true?"
True.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The other thing, too, that we must be alert to is that when we over explain, when we talk a lot and talk too much, and we're all guilty of doing that, it's actually an avoidance strategy.
I actually wanted to ask you, what do you think is the reason that some of us we get lost in our stories?
It's
Yeah.
an avoidance strategy
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
because when we talk a lot, then we don't have to face the possibility or get in contact with the feeling that perhaps I am unlovable. Perhaps it's my fault. Perhaps there's something wrong with me. Perhaps it's me.
Yeah.
Perhaps it's not what happened in my mother's family. Perhaps it's not what happened in my father's family. Perhaps the problem is me. Maybe I'm the ugly one. Maybe I'm the unlovable one. Maybe I'm the untouchable one. And so when we talk a lot, it is an avoidance strategy to actually feeling what's there. So when we pull that back and we move into silence and we're just with a simple fact of something that happened in the family, then we have the opportunity to feel. Mhm. You see, every client that walks in the door, whether it's for a private session or whether it's for a workshop, carries within them a request. And often that request is unspoken, mhm, or not even fully felt, but that request is, please just hold me. Please just hold me. And so, as facilitators, we need to be aware of that. And we can only be aware of that if we've touched those spaces within ourselves. So, for this workshop that we're doing in Kuala Lumpur for the second time, and I'm really, really happy to come, I'm just so excited. Um, for facilitators, it's really important to come into contact with that within yourself. Because if you do not know that space in yourself, then you cannot
Can
invite
hold
somebody
it.
else into that
Yeah.
space.
Yeah.
We cannot invite a client into a space that we've never entered. We cannot invite a client to touch something that we have never touched. So we have to really intimately know that place of deep vulnerability, of deep hurt, of deep doubt, even of self hatred and self rejection.
Yeah.
We have to know what that feels like. Mm-hmm. Because
It's like
otherwise
really
we
go. Yeah. Yeah. Go on. Go
otherwise
ahead.
we become otherwise we become theorists
Yeah.
applying a theory to a movement,
Yeah.
and that doesn't help anyone at all. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so for me, the great archetype is Chiron. You know the story of Chiron, the
Yeah.
wounded healer?
Yeah. The wounded healer. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that is my
Mm-hmm.
archetype. So
Mm-hmm.
um, I was drawn into family constellation work because I came from this insanely dysfunctional family and I
Mm-hmm.
was looking for answers.
Exactly.
and,
Yeah.
and psychotherapy just was not answering. It answered some questions for me, but it wasn't really answering the big questions for me. It was
Mm-hmm.
helpful for me to tell somebody my story, to have somebody listen to me with everything that had happened in my life that had
Mm-hmm.
value.
Yeah.
But in terms of reorienting the whatever the word is, reorientating myself to the family and coming into right relationship with the family and all that had happened, that was constellation work that helped me with that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So it's really facing, coming in touch with the truth. I hear you saying the word truth so many times. It's really like
Mm-hmm.
coming in touch with it. So is this what language of the soul is all about? Or how did you come even to that? What is it that name? Because I know that when I read your book, it's about the healing sentences, but language of the soul has a very different dimension
Mm-hmm.
that it's touching than healing
It's it's
sentences.
it's about using what I would call that distilled language.
Okay.
Distilled language stripped of all the story, stripped of all the interpretation, stripped of the emotional languaging, down to the bare knuckles truth of what is happening right here, right
Yeah.
now. Because language is important. How we say things is really important. How we word things.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm. So, for example, fairly recently, um, working with a client, she was just talking and suddenly she said, "Oh, well, my grandmother never worked."
You wrote an
And
article about that. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and I looked at her and I said, "What do you mean your grandmother never worked?"
Yeah.
Well, my grandmother never worked. I said, "Oh."
Mm-hmm.
I said, "So you're telling me that the woman who gave birth to 8 children never worked?" I said, "No, no, no. What I mean is she didn't have a job."
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
so raising 8 kids is not a job?
Yeah.
So I said to her, "I think what you really mean, she didn't have a salaried job outside of the home."
Mm-hmm.
And so that was a way in which we undervalue the work of women and the work of our mothers and our grandmothers. And so how we word things communicates a lot about our belief systems and what we've been taught. Mhm.
Yeah.
So all of society, a lot of society says my grandmother didn't work. And it is a barefaced lie.
Mm-hmm.
Let's
Yeah.
call it what
Yeah.
it is. It's a lie. It's just
Yeah.
not true.
Yeah.
She probably worked 18 hours a day.
Yeah. Yeah.
if not
Absolutely.
longer.
If not longer, exactly.
If she
Getting
had a
up in the
3-month-old,
night.
if
Yeah.
she had a 3-month-old, a 2-year-old, and a 4-year-old, and a 7-year-old,
Mm-hmm.
and her husband doesn't think it's got anything to do with him, that's her job, then I can assure you the woman has gone without sleep for several years.
Yeah. And since you mentioned that, because it came up in the session with your clients. So, for example, when we feel that, or when it's not about feeling, we hear it. Oh, okay, the grandma or even the mother didn't go to work. She was just staying at home with the kids. How does it show up, or how can it show up in a client? This kind of a dynamic, this kind of a belief, this kind of a statement. What's
Well,
happening within us?
it's really about the transgenerational undervaluing of a woman's role.
Okay. Yeah.
So it's really about buying into this patriarchal view that a man's
Mm-hmm.
contribution is far more important, far more significant than a woman's contribution. Mhm. But actually, women, I mean, all of us appeared from a
Mm-hmm.
woman's body.
Yep.
That's extremely powerful. There's not a person on this
Yep.
planet that did not emerge from a woman's body. So
Yeah.
let's be very clear about that. And so when we buy into the transgenerational devaluing of a woman's place in the world,
Mm-hmm.
then how can we possibly value ourselves? And so when we hold this place of my mother, my grandmother, my great grandmother have less value than my father, my
Mm-hmm.
grandfather, my great grandfather, then there's an imbalance that lives within us. And so
Yeah.
it's about bowing to both. This is not about being anti men, not
Mm-hmm.
at
Of
all,
course not.
because
No.
that's not a healthy response either.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's about not buying into the view that certain people, certain groups, certain genders have less value
Mm-hmm.
than others. So it's really about value being inclusive. Value being inclusive. You could argue, maybe, and it would be ridiculous to argue this, but I can imagine somebody arguing, oh, engineers are more important than artists. Well, yeah. Well, we lived without bridges and trains for centuries, but can you imagine life without art? And
Well.
so everything has equal value. Mhm. Life without art would be really rather dull. Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
And life without bridges and trains would be really rather inconvenient. Mhm. But they're both equally important. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I'm thinking if we widen our view and to really talk about value, then this is also one of the reasons for all the conflicts in the world
Absolutely.
as well.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
it's really important to look at it. Okay.
So
Yeah.
with this workshop specifically,
Mm-hmm.
I I want to invite people into the authentic space of the heart without masks. That's important. I want to strip back the love mask. Mhm. Love masks,
Mm-hmm.
they don't help anyone. They're
Yeah.
inauthentic.
Yeah.
And again, when we carry a love mask, it's because we have decided in order to be liked and loved by people, I have to be like this. And that really comes back to childhood. In order to be loved by my mother, or in order to be loved by my father, I have to be a certain way. Mhm. So if I'm a boy, I have to act this way. If I'm a girl, I have to act that way. So many girls are raised to be polite and nice. And so they train themselves to be polite and nice all the time. Boys are punished for being vulnerable. And so they're trained to be quote unquote strong and assertive.
Strong. Yeah.
And so and so we learn these different behaviors. And so we carry all of these masks. And so we can carry the strong and assertive mask, the power mask, or we can carry the sweet and nice and lovely love mask. And so in the workshop, it's about stripping that back, which can be very frightening.
Yeah.
So this is a workshop. It is an invitation into more vulnerability, because when we've constructed an alternate self in order to strategize, giving the other person what we think that they want in order for us to love, we then start believing that this constructed self is us. So when we come into this work, we then are required to allow that which we believe to be our true selves to die. Oh, I have spent my entire life navigating the world, all of my relationships, all of my friendships, through this mask of an artificial self that was developed to survive, that was developed to strategize around my mother's feelings, my father's moods. And now you want me to give that up? I don't know who I am without that.
Yeah.
I have no idea who I am without that. And so it can be a very frightening place.
Yeah.
And then some people say, I'm literally afraid this feeling that's coming up, it could kill me. And I say, then die. Then die. And then you will discover what dies, because you won't die. Something will die. And then you'll walk out of the workshop a different person. So that's the invitation. So that little bit of introduction could really terrify people and tell them not to come to the workshop, or inspire some people saying, maybe there's a wonderful opportunity here.
Yeah.
I'm not expecting overnight transformation for everyone. This is a process. But if we can open that door to truth and authenticity, to give you a map, to invite you to walk into the room where authenticity and truth is present, then that's a start. Just to dip your toe into it for a weekend, or jump into the deep end of the swimming pool. It's your choice. Because what I want to make clear, if you think that you need to do this in order to please me, the facilitator, then you're doing exactly the same thing you've been doing your whole
Yeah.
life,
Yeah.
strategizing around doing what you think is going to make the other person happy.
Happy. Yeah.
So I say to the students, whether you dip your toe in, or whether you dive into the pool, or somewhere in between, all good. You're not here to please me. You're here
Yeah.
to discover something for yourself. Yeah.
And I remember when I joined your workshop in Bali 2 years ago, I think, or 3 years. I
3 years ago,
remember
I think. Yeah.
3 years ago, meanwhile, yeah. You were talking a lot about emotions because, of course, some of us, we are afraid to express the emotions in front of
Mm-hmm.
other people because we are not used to it, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
like the suppression and repression of that has been going on for all the time. And I still remember you said that there is even scientific, I think, research that says an emotion in the body stays maximum for 26 minutes
Yeah,
and it
26
just
minutes. Yeah.
moves. So
Yes.
I just found it this fascinating, and it's true.
Mm-hmm.
I've never seen anyone, including myself, to stay in the same state for much, much longer. So if we allow ourselves to face the truth, to face ourselves, our whatever
Mm-hmm.
is in our heart right now, I think this is really, really very helpful,
So
especially
what?
to know that the emotion will move. Yeah.
So what happens is we start to feel something dreadful. We start to feel our core wound that we've been
Yeah.
holding tightly, 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 perhaps for decades. And we've invested a lot of energy keeping that feeling
Hidden.
hidden. We
Yeah.
don't want anyone else to know the
Yeah.
depth of shame that we feel, the depth of guilt that we feel, the depth of self hatred that we feel, the depth of just wanting to die that we feel. We don't want anyone to know that. We
Yeah.
keep that deeply, deeply, deeply hidden. Because one of our fears is if I reveal that, that somebody might actually say to me, well, of course your mother couldn't love you. How awful if
Yeah.
somebody actually confirmed that we are indeed unlovable. Mhm. So that feeling of I am unlovable, I am not worthy of love, or I am consumed with self hatred and I keep that hidden. And so the question is, how much of our life force energy are we using to keep that in place? And then the other question is, if you had access to all of the life force energy that you are using to keep that in place, what would your life look like? What would your life look like? It would look very different. Because if you're using all of that life force energy to keep that hidden and keep that in place, not to show that to anyone, that's a lot of acrobatics. And that takes a
Very
lot of focus,
exhausting.
exhausting. And a lot of
Yeah.
us don't realize that we are exhausted.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so we're trying to manifest our dreams. We're trying to create the life that we want to create. But most of our life force energy is then taken up pretending to be someone that we're not, or hiding away an essential part of ourselves.
Yeah.
And so when that feeling begins to arise, begin to arise, there's a feeling of dread. Oh my goodness, this is now going to be revealed, not only revealed to others, but the full force of it is going to be revealed
Yeah.
to me, how I have actually been feeling. Because it's bizarre. We get very angry when people lie to us, and yet we've been lying to ourselves our entire lives. The chief liar in our lives is us.
Yeah.
We're past
Yeah.
masters at lying to ourselves. And so this feeling of dread when this begins to surface, and then we think, oh, if this comes up, I might actually die in this moment. My invitation is then fall on the sword of truth and allow yourselves to die. And then we see what happens. Because a life in that prison is not a full life, it's not a complete life. You see, something that I wrote quite recently, a constellation merely opens the bird cage. That's all it does. The bird must decide to fly. The bird must decide to fly. And so the work that I'm doing with this 3-day workshop
Yeah.
is not just opening up the bird cage, but giving you the tools to know and to understand and to realize that nothing bad is going to happen if you leave the bird
Bird
cage.
cage.
That's where life is, outside of the
Yeah.
bird cage.
Yeah.
And so a constellation does some of the work, but the bird must decide to fly. Mhm.
Yeah. 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 We make choices every single day, every single second in a way, right?
Yeah.
It's like,
Mhm.
yeah, nobody can take us out from that bird cage. Yeah,
Yeah.
you're right.
So it's
Shavasti, you
my deep
spoke.
hope
Yeah.
it's my
Sorry.
deep hope that people from all over Southeast Asia will come. I want people from Singapore to come up. I want people to come down from Bangkok, from Ho Chi Minh City, from Phnom Penh, from Hanoi, as far afield as Hong Kong if they want to come. I understand some people from Hong Kong are coming. So invite them all. Invite them from Jakarta.
Yeah.
Come from
Yeah.
Jakarta. Come from wherever you are. Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Just maybe one last thing, because you speak a lot about love as well. In the beginning, you said that this is what constellations actually taught you how to love.
Mhm.
Would you just elaborate on that a little bit? What is it so special about love in
Well,
constellations and then in our life?
for me, love, the opening doorway to love is the total acceptance of what is.
Mhm.
The total
Yeah.
acceptance of what is. Um, for me, the opportunity to represent in other people's constellations, that was a big chunk of teaching me how to love, because I got to walk in somebody else's shoes
Mhm.
just for a few minutes.
Yeah.
I remember one of the most pivotal experiences in my life was representing the father of three children. And the amount of love that this man had for his children was almost overwhelming for my body.
Mm. I have
And
goosebumps when you talk about
and
it.
and he was totally head over heels in love with each of his children. There was no favorite child. Each child fully occupied his heart. And I came out of that constellation thinking, I had no idea that there were men on this planet who could do this. So it shifted my whole view of men
Mhm.
and the world of men. I think, oh,
Mhm. Mhm.
huh. All these stories I've been told about men are not universally true.
Yeah.
Some of them are
Yeah.
true for some men,
Of course.
but they're not universally true. So it opened up all of these different
Mhm.
doorways.
Mhm.
And then being able to represent a perpetrator as well
Mhm.
and feel into the bigger story behind them. Doesn't let them off the hook. They're still fully responsible for what they've done. But it's not this non human monster that's there. It's an actual human being who
Mhm.
has become incredibly lost on the path. So I learned how to weep for the perpetrators, to truly weep
Mhm.
for the perpetrators, to really take on board,
Yeah.
oh my goodness, what damage they have done to themselves,
Selves. Yeah.
what damage they have done to their families and to their descendants. That is something to weep over. And
Mhm.
so these gentle movements of looking at truth and looking at what is in a very stripped back way, this taught me how to love. Mhm.
Mhm.
You see,
Mhm.
mm, love is not saying to someone, I love you. Mhm. That's an important part of human expression because we like verbal communication. Of course, it's important that that is said. Um, but love is really taking somebody into your heart in a very authentic and vulnerable way. Love also really exists in the silence, just looking at someone. I often say that the truth is present in the silence after the words have been spoken. And that's where love is also present. Mm-hmm. And so moving in and out of these spaces, I knew what a love mask was. I had a love mask.
Mhm.
There was a time when I was sorry to use this term, but when I was a new age bunny, it was all
Love
about
and
love and
light.
light. It was all about love and light. Mhm. Ah, bless you. Mm.
Yeah. Mhm.
Um, and that was just me figuring out another way to get people to like me and to get
Yeah.
people to love me. And what I've noticed is that authenticity is what really, really works. Authenticity. And so it's a new skill that can be learned. It's not a new pretense.
Mhm.
It's not a new mask.
Yeah.
But it's a new skill to really stand back and be present with what is. What if I strip back all of my stories? What if I surrender all of my beliefs in this moment? What if I surrender the belief that certain people are worthy of more love than others? What if I strip back the belief that says I'm only worthy of love when I do this or when I become that? What if, what if, what if, what if, what if? And I just get quiet. then something else emerges. Mhm. And so
Mm,
that's been my learning.
yeah,
And I never cease being the student. I never cease being the client. Mhm. And there are moments in a workshop when I'm working when it's not me. There's something greater that becomes present. Mhm.
yeah,
And we then simply become the empty vessel through which that which is greater moves us. Mhm. And so often when I'm speaking, I'm also listening to what I'm saying because they're not truly my words. It comes from something greater, something bigger. I try not to put a label on that,
yeah,
but I always know when it's present. It's like, oh, okay. There are some constellations where that movement of grace has been so profound that the entire workshop is quiet for a couple of
yeah.
minutes afterwards.
Silent, yeah.
People don't break into chit chat as they often do. It's just like, oh,
Hmm.
something greater has been present here. There's been a more raw, um, authentic truth or love, and all of those labels don't describe what's just been
Yeah,
present
they
either.
don't. Yeah.
Even the word love and truth just become very impotent words in that moment. So,
Hmm.
but we have to grasp for words to try and describe what we mean. But just that silence, I call it the presence. Mhm.
Hmm.
Or the benevolence. The benevolence. Yeah, that's a better word.
Beautiful. Yeah, yeah,
When the benevolence has been present, then we just want to be quiet with it. Yeah. It cannot be created, it can only be invited through our commitment to being authentic and truthful. That becomes the fertile ground upon which the benevolence can be invited to enter.
yeah. Yeah, very beautifully said. And I have a feeling that that's the reason as well, Shavasti, that not even one person can be untouched during such 3 days workshop that we are offering, because there is so much happening, but not in doing, in the energy of doing, but in the energy of being, that presence that you're also talking about, that I feel everybody gets touched in one way or another. So whether
Absolutely.
someone gets a constellation or not, you will be working with language of the soul. So everyone get the chance
Yeah,
to work
I
and
thank you for addressing that because a lot of people
mhm,
they come to they hesitate to sign up to these workshops and they say, well, they're going to be 50 people and my chances of getting a constellation are very low.
yeah,
And I say to them, okay, step into a different way of working. Hmm. And with the exercises and the processes that I've developed, you will go away
yeah,
with something. And
yeah.
you will go away with, I think you said after the Bali workshop that you went home with more than you anticipated to receive.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Hmm.
absolutely. And I have to add that in Kuala Lumpur, the exercises you've done, so some of them, they were different from Bali,
Hmm.
but some of them sentences were similar. And
Hmm.
yet I was able to go deeper with that
Yes,
sentence. So it's
absolutely.
even when we repeat something, it does not mean, oh, I've done it, I'm done.
Mm.
There is always a different level of depth, I find.
So
And
let me tell you about
yeah,
repetition. I'll tell the story very quickly. I've told the story a million times, I'm sure. So I went to China to study Tai Chi, and I was there for about a year. And I changed schools for one reason or another. I changed schools, and I went to a new school, and I showed the teacher my movements, and I was very confident. I could do this. I could do this. I've been studying Tai Chi for months and months and months and months, and I could tell that she was extremely underwhelmed. I could see with the look on her face. And she said, well, I will take you into my school, but you cannot join the class yet. And I was crushed. I thought, no, I'm good at this. I've been practicing this for months. And she had me do the same movement over and over again for hours and hours and hours for a couple of weeks.
Wow.
In the beginning, I hated her. How dare she?
Yeah.
Now, that was one of the greatest gifts of my life
Yeah.
because she taught me to slow down.
Low down.
And this is a principle that I've brought into my family constellation work because a healing sentence like, I take you as my father, let's say, it has a life in its own right. It's not a one-off deal. You don't stand in front of your father and say, I take you as my father, and
Yeah.
oh, okay, it's done.
Mm-hmm.
You can
Mm-hmm.
work with a sentence like that for 10 years.
Yeah.
And each
Yeah.
time it lands in a different place.
Different way. Yeah.
Each time it's felt differently, it's heard differently, it means something slightly different. And so we have a different relationship to it because it's a transmission.
Yeah.
And so each time our energy is different. And so our relationship to it is different. So it's a
Different.
journey.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
even if we do some of the same exercises, there's a purpose behind that. It's an
Yeah.
invitation to go
Yeah.
deeper, to go deeper, to go deeper. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, and it's interesting because I was just watching some YouTube before we came on a call and listening, I think, to Peter Crone, and he said the two most important words in the world are slow down.
Right. Yeah.
And now you mention it, so
I
it
have,
really
have, I have one
falls
more
into
thing to say
place.
about this before I go. So when I was at a healing school, we were working with a particular technique, and I I called the teacher over and I just said, I'm having difficulties here. I'm actually bored with what we're doing. And she looked at me. She said, oh, you're not bored. I said, no, I am bored. She said, no, 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 no. You're not bored. You're just afraid of contact.
Here you go. Here you go. Yeah,
And she was spot on correct.
yeah,
And I
yeah,
started to cry in that moment. She was
yeah.
spot on correct.
Mm-hmm.
So if you came last year and if you're tempted to think it might be boring to
Mm-hmm.
do similar things this year, think about that for a moment.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
This is an invitation into
Yeah,
deeper
yeah,
contact. It is contact
absolutely.
that heals. It is when two hearts connect. That is when healing takes
Happens.
place. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Beautiful. That's really a wonderful,
Mhm.
even sentence to finish our interview, our chat, because where two hearts come into contact, this is when healing takes place.
Takes place.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
beautiful.
Mhm.
Wonderful. So I'm looking forward, of course, to have you here
Mhm.
in 2 months' time. Exactly in 2 months, we will
Oh,
be
exactly 2 months' time.
finishing the second day of the workshop. The
Right.
workshop is
Okay.
happening from the 29th to 31st, just in time as well for Independence Day of
Oh
Malaysia. So
wow.
really
Oh, what
beautiful.
what timing?
Yeah,
How
right?
symbolic is that? How symbolic is
Perfect.
that? Come to
Perfect.
the workshop and find your independence.
Yeah,
Finally, find out who
exactly.
you are,
Yeah, yeah.
separate from the stories of generations.
Beautiful.
From the stories of generations. Yeah, yeah.
Good. Looking forward, Shavasti. Thank you so much for your time. Have a lovely, lovely day. And yeah, we will put up all the necessary information on social
Okay.
media and you can sign up. That's for those who are listening. And I'm looking forward to have you here in Kuala Lumpur in 2 months'
And
time.
I would love to have the whole of Southeast Asia there. I'm not like the entire population, but people from everywhere, every corner of Southeast Asia or Asia coming along. Yeah,
Let's
yeah,
manifest
good.
that. Thank
Okay,
you.
good.
Okay,
Thank you,
thank you so
Monica.
much. Thank you.
Bye bye.
Bye.